So that is where we stand with that. So that means the total, I'll give you the totals as slow as I can so you can write them down, but then I'll give you the total and how it affects where the margin is right now. So for President Trump, 1,577. For former Vice President Biden, 1,128. For Joe Jorgensen, 43. And write-ins, 7, because we look at every single ballot. So that's why the write-ins are there. I do not know if those are qualified write-ins or just Mickey Mouse write-ins. I don't know the answer to that. So when we left off the call this morning, we were looking at a margin of 13,378. The net gain for the president on this memory card is 449 for a new total of 12,929. So that is where we stand right now. The situation is because of the audit, we found this. We saw some potentials on this. And again, this is where the county had a couple of places where they should have been able to see it. 1, the absentee voter file for the reconciliation. They obviously didn't do that. 2, the check-ins. They didn't check that. And then 3, the tabulator screen on the election management system has a box that's checked or unchecked depending on whether the card has been uploaded or accounted for. So there were several spots where the human beings who were running it, this didn't follow the procedure, and that's why this happens. But this is why you have the audit to discover these things. Now, let me frame this up with a couple of other items. We have 57 counties that are flat out at 0 deviations from the ballot count that they started with. So that's 57. We have 21 other counties that are either +1 or -1 off of the original count that they had. So that's 78 that are basically spot on. We have another 32 counties that are in single digits that they're off. So they're finalizing that, looking, did they miscalculate something? Did they switch data entry, things along those lines. But single digits is not that much to be concerned about on these things, but we're trying to get it as right as we can, but to prove the outcomes are proper and correct. Now, again, I want to frame up how the audit works. You know, we saw that Fulton was done with the audit and DeKalb was done with the audit. They were done with the first phase of the audit, which is the hand counting. Then you have to go to the data entry side where we have a lot of quality control measures. Did you put the numbers in properly? Did you get every batch? Did you transpose any numbers? Did you forget to put a number from the tally sheet into the data entry? Now, for larger counties, there's more pieces of paper. It's going to take more time. And again, as we have been saying repeatedly, the human beings that are part of this are the weakest link in the whole system. But that's why there's these checks and double checks and triple checks that we do before we finalize the audit phase of this. And that's why this handout audit is important. Now, there's one other county that we have a potential, it looks like in Walton County, there may be a memory card with 224 votes on it from an election day polling location. That is still, we're still trying to see if that was a batch that might have been missed or if there's actually a memory card. I don't have a final answer on that yet, but there could be potentially 224 votes in Walton County as well. But we don't have what that is yet. Floyd County is continuing to do their scanning, and they should be done by about 6 or 6:30, and they're having to rescan all of the early votes because at some level they were intermingled. The batches were not segregated from what had been scanned before versus what hadn't potentially. So that came through the audit process. So they had to do all of them. I think it's a little over 8,000. And then on the provisional side, they're having to rescan those at the end of this because it looks like they had 2 batches of them and they scanned 3. So that'll probably take a couple of votes away. So I'm not sure what the final outcome of that would be for Floyd, but they are on a pace. They got permission from both their county attorney and their county elections board to take these steps so they can recertify either tonight or tomorrow morning and re-upload everything. They will have those results added to what will be the state certified results at the end of the day. Let's see. Those are the basic points we have right now. I'll now open it up for any questions the way we did before, where you raise your hand and then Ari or Walter will ask you to unmute and you can ask us. We need to try to do this one at a time. We'll try to get to everybody's questions. I know there's gonna be some out there, but let's just go ahead and get rolling. So who are we starting with, Ari or Walter?
Nick Wooten.
Okay.
Hey, Gabe.
Hey, Gabe, it's Nick Wooten with McClatchy. Just could you go over exactly what happened in Fayette County and how that's different from Floyd? Just more of a developed explanation.
Okay. For Floyd County, they literally had a box of ballots that no one even scanned. So they were off to the side, and there would never have been a record of a tabular being produced that wasn't accounted for. So there was no backstop because of that decision or that lack of a decision that was made. In Fayette County, they had them scanned, and they had the ballots. They had both sides of the equation, but in their practices at the end of doing their reconciliation, they failed to do the reconciliation properly. And we saw that there was already a deviation on the absentee in person, which is the early vote, and the audit confirmed it. So they did all the practices except one thing, whereas in Floyd, it was several things. And a secondary thing with Floyd, they had a very bad situation in the August runoff as well. So it was a series of managerial miscues in Floyd that was the reason it kind of rose to that next level. This is something that we recognized. We wanted to make sure it was there before we started making suppositions that absolutely was this. So going through the audit process allowed us to get to that point.
So these were just a portion of votes that were on this memory card, but not uploaded to the county's electronic results.
Correct. They had scanned them. They were ready to go. They didn't do the reconciliation process properly, and there was 3 different ways they could have checked, and it just got by them. But we saw that there was an issue because they had already done the check-ins into the absentee ballot file, and then we saw the ENR uploads, and we saw they were off by about 2,700 and some odd votes. So we said, okay, either they doubled up check-ins for people, which doesn't make any sense, or they're missing a card. So we went through the audit process, counted them out, the votes were there, and that's when we realized, okay, there is a card, and then they found the card. If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, who's next?
Kate Tobin.
Kate? I saw you there for a second.
Yeah, Kate, you have to unmute your phone. All right, tell you, let's come back. Mark Nacy.
Yes, thank you for doing this again. Do you have a summary of how many counties have completely finished their audit process and how many counties have not yet finished, and also how many votes have been loaded to the state and how many are remaining?
The votes loaded to the state, we don't do this. We have an audit is a complete audit, so we don't do a partial on that. The best way I can tell you, the ones I know for sure are flat out done, are the 57 that are spot on 0 right now, and the 21 that are 1 up or lower. Some of our elections officials are very perfectionist, and they want to go through and track down those. If they're 4 off, they want to figure out why and get to it. So they have the opportunity to do that. We have another 30 hours in the audit. So in some of the larger counties, it's going to take more time because there's more pieces of paper and more potential for there to be issues that need to be, noodled through with the consultants on the ground and with the elections team that are there in those counties. So that would be 78 probably would be a good number to say they're flat out just done with the whole thing. And they've got their stuff loaded in Arlo, and they can go to bed tonight and sleep well. And there's another 119 or so, or 121 or so that still need to keep on working a little bit. Is that right? Wait a second. Don't make me do math on the fly. Either way, 78 minus 159, you get the basic number.
Very good. And I'm also interested in the voter histories. That will help us do some analysis on who voted and who didn't. Are those voter history files completely updated? I see like 4.9 million records, but I know in the past, sometimes we wait until certification is done.
So some of the people are still uploading their credit for voting into the ENET system, which is a very frustrating thing because that should have been done a lot earlier. But we're asking a lot of these people this year. There's been a lot on them. They're either managing a pandemic, they're managing these elections and this new equipment and a new system that they haven't been used to seeing before. But now this will be the 3rd or 4th time they're going through it. I anticipate that you will see the final uploads within the next week in terms of all the people getting the credit for voting. And that was one of the issues I discussed earlier with Fulton County. They were behind on getting some of that credit for voting. And I've seen a couple other counties that are still kind of catching up on the credit for voting. They're going through the certificates and checking and making sure everything got done.
And
just
finally,
all part of the process.
Very good. And finally, going back to our call this morning, you talked about investigations of Fulton County. Is Fulton County now at risk of having to pay that $50,000 penalty that would have been abated if it had complied with the order?
I'm not going to get into that right now. It's a legal question. And I really honestly don't know. So that would be a legal question to go to our counsel and Ryan Germany. And look, we're trying to work with these counties because our main thing is the money's, that's just taxpayer money. So they're just shifting from one bucket to another. Our main thing is we want to make sure they run elections properly and well and tightly, because we're trying to work hard to protect the integrity of the vote overall.
All right, let's try Kate again.
It says you're unmuted, Kate. Is your microphone on?
My microphone is
There
on.
we go. All right, there we go.
All right. I would like you to step us through how you expect events to play out on Thursday and Friday. Are all counties on track to upload their data by the deadline? Is there any processing of that data that has to go on in your office before you tell us what happened? Do you expect to have a briefing on Thursday or Friday, or what do you anticipate?
I anticipate that we will continue doing these 2-a-days until we get to the full process and get through certification, because we want to be as transparent as we can to let people know what is happening on the ground so they have a greater faith in the outcome at the end of the day. The processing is still going on at the county level. They have, like I said, a little less than 30 hours left to get all the work done, get everything loaded to Arlo for us to get the final audit report. So then we can say that, yes, the outcome of the election is the outcome of the election. And the hope is, and I said yesterday, the hope is we don't find any more of these counties with a couple of hundred here or 3,000 votes there. But the reason you do the audit is to find these kind of human errors and then make sure that they are corrected. So we will continue this process. We will follow the law. I don't see any reason why we can't meet the midnight deadline tomorrow for the audit to be completed. And then working Thursday and Friday in our office to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, so we can get to the final certification. Because the other thing that our office is still doing right now is building ballots so that we can have them out the door ready to go for the Saturday UACAVA deadline for the military and overseas voters. That is our main goal, is to make sure we have smooth election administration and have the proper outcomes reflected in all these elections.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Archith.
Thanks, guys. Hey, Gabe, real quick. I know this is planning the weeks ahead with the Jan 5th Senate runoff. What will be different in terms of what you guys might be doing with other counties and county officials, given what you guys have seen this past 2 weeks? Is there something you guys have already put together?
No, it won't be that much different. I mean, most of the counties have executed everything very well. So the main things we'll be looking at least on the voter registration side, is we want to make sure that they are verifying people's they're intending to live in the state, and make sure people understand the laws and rules around that. We are going to definitely go over page 204 of the election manual, showing them that they can look and understand when they have a memory card that is still not accounted for. That's a very specific thing we have in the training. And obviously some people didn't get that, including Fayette, it looks like. So that's an important bit of training. We've actually had a conversation today with our training manager and our Center for Elections director about making sure that we really focus on that, because there's lots of tools available to make sure you're doing your job right. The issue you have sometimes is people get so caught up in doing their job, they're not checking all their boxes to make sure they're doing it properly. They just want to get it done. And as I said in our very first press conference, speed is great. We love speed. We much more prefer accuracy as the final outcome. And that's one of the things we're going to really hit home with everybody. But like I said, we got 159 counties, and the vast majority are doing everything great.
Thank you.
Okay, Zach.
Yeah, thanks, Gabe. Thanks for doing this. I think you actually kind of alluded to this in a past answer. You said you're pretty confident you're going to hit that midnight deadline tomorrow. Of those remaining, I'm not going to do the math either. Of those remaining 70-ish counties, is there anybody that you think that could come kind of close to that midnight deadline? Anyone that you're concerned about, or do you think that you're all in a good shape?
There's no way to be specific about this, because it's going through the process that shows if there's an issue or not. I mean, granted, the larger counties are to have the potential for more issues just because there's more pieces of paper, more human beings, more tally sheets, and more more items to be put into the data collection bucket. So the larger the county, the more likely there is to have some error that needs to be corrected and found. And what you want to have is the smallest amount of errors to be chasing as you get through this, which is why it was very good that the largest counties like DeKalb and Fulton finished the physical front end of the count so quickly, because that gives us the time to do the quality control we need to make sure the outcome is actually proper and correct. So there's no way for me to say, I'm expecting this county to do better or this county to do worse, because it's all a process, and they could have one person who transposed numbers on a tally sheet in, let's say Webster County. And that's a thing that has to be corrected just as much as if a person did that on a tally sheet in Fulton County. So there's no way for me to say one county is giving me more pause than the other. At this point, all the counties have to do their jobs, and they seem to be doing them well. Voting Works, our outside consulting vendor on this one, feels pretty good about where we're at right now, especially, like I said, with the larger counties getting the front end of the work done. It gives them the opportunity to go through and do the quality control work to make sure the outcomes are correct, and there's not, and mitigate human error. We can't eliminate human error, but we can mitigate human error. Who we got next?
Let's see, Julia.
Hi, thank you for doing another one of these today. I wanted to get your office's response to the release that went out from the Trump campaign this afternoon with the subject, Georgia recount reveals that President Trump is right about voting irregularities and fraud, saying he was correct to raise these concerns that favored Biden-Harris, specifically noting the issue in Floyd County and also taking aim at Georgia's consent decree, saying that it makes it impossible to check signatures. What is your response? I don't know if you saw the full release.
I didn't see it. I actually busy doing the work of the election precludes me sometimes from reading the politics and the press around some of that. Nice glasses, by the way. The situation we see here is Floyd County was found because of the audit. He picked up a good chunk of votes because of it. So our process is actually aiding him on that front. But on that side, we're just trying to find all the legal votes. And that was one that was found because of this audit. The consent decree, he's just wrong. He's just flat out 100% foursquare wrong. The consent decree, literally, all we did was send out an official election bulletin telling people, hey, follow our rules and how we already do signature match, and give people a notification within 24 hours, within 11 days of the election. It's just wrong. It's confusing to people, and people want to believe it because the president's saying it. But this consent decree literally didn't do anything and change the law of how we do signature match. If you look at it, it says you can match the signature back to the request, but the request was already matched to what was on file. And what they do is they always keep all the signatures there so that they can have a history of these things. One of the things we learned from what we did is we strengthened the training from the Georgia Bureau of Investigations to where you say, you want to see a history. If you get more signatures, you get better signature match. And that's one of the things we did. We actually strengthened signature match, not the opposite of that. So on that one, he's just wrong, and it's just confusing to people. So I wish they would understand what the consent decree actually did and what our law actually says, and the practices that our office actually does with the counties actually doing it. This office doesn't look at signatures. Counties look at signatures. And the situation we have there is that if there's a question, they run it up the chain to say, well, what do y'all think? And they get extra sets of eyes before they would throw a potential signature out. And I talked to one of the elections directors who basically says it moves up to the registrar, which is me, that this is the election they're talking about, to look at the thing that's the final person to say, yes, this either is a valid signature or it's not. And if it's not a valid signature, if they're within 11 days, that to be in 24 hours. Before then, they have to be notified within 3 days. And they have 3 days after the election to cure that situation. And there's another thing I want to make sure people understand, because I've seen this 3% number thrown around as the old rejection rate. What they're doing there is they're comparing apples and oranges. The entire rejection rate is 3%. And the vast majority of that 3% is the ballots that show up late. If it's just signature match on the oath, that is 0.15% to 0.2%. And that's been that way, as I said on the phone call this morning, in 16, 18, and 20. It's about the same. Of the 1.3 million ballots we have this year, we had 2,011 that were eventually, not allowed to be brought in, which is 0.15%. In 2016, the last presidential election, there were 580 ballots that had a missing or inaccurate oath, which is a signature. out of 246,000, which was, guess what, 0.15%. So they're confusing the issue in some degree. And again, they have due process through a court of law to try to do anything they want to. We encourage the president and his people, if you have evidence and you feel like you have a good case, bring it up to the court of law, let them do due process. We're going to continue to follow the law in our office. And the law says we're going to finish this audit by Wednesday night, and we're going to certify by Friday.
Okay, next is Alexa.
Hey, Gabe, thanks for doing this. I just have a question about Fayette County. Can you explain exactly, what it means to find a memory card? I mean, our readers, know that there's a paper record of ballots. So how did they look for the memory card as part of the audit process, or how did they even know that was there, and what role does the memory card play
Okay.
with the paper ballots?
During the early vote process in this state, we use what are called the polling place scanners, or an ICP. That's the Dominion letters for it, ICP. It's a polling place scanner. It's a scanner that sits on a really big black box. It's a locked box. It's the same thing we use on election day. So what happened in this particular case, in Fayette County, they were given the credit for voting appropriately in our voter registration system. And so you can see the number of people when you get, it's absentee in person. So it's in the absentee voter files where you see this. And when you see a person that has submitted their request, voted, and had it accepted all on the same day, that is an absentee in person voter. You can see that in the file. So we already saw that there was a discrepancy on what was in the election night reporting, which was about 2,755 or 2,700 off, give or take. We can't be sure because some votes are skipped and stuff. So we saw that already. So we said, okay, let's just let the process move forward with the audit, and we'll see if those ballots are there. And sure enough, when they counted the ballots, they had 2,700 more than they had on election night reporting, which matches what they had on their check-ins. So that means that they had a scanner that they emptied the ballots out from, but never uploaded the memory card that had the record of those votes. So I don't know this specifically, but my assumption is they said, oh, let's go look and find this memory card. They finally found the memory card in a little baggie that has which place it was, and they were able to open it and see that yes, there was these were the votes. They do happen to match up with the other things we just counted. So that's where that came from. And that's what you take the memory card that gets loaded into the air-gapped election management system, which is then aggregated through what they call RTR, which is results tally reporting. And then that's we take a thumb drive and get those results out and put it into our election night reporting system from CITL. And that's what you see on the Secretary of State's website, which is the unofficial results. So we knew that there was an issue on this particular one, but we didn't know exactly if they had the ballots or not. So they did. That matched the check-in, which then they found the card, which matches the amounts. So the guardrails that were there caught this, and we're going to be able to put those results into the final amounts. And you hope that people do every part of their job perfectly. In this case, that did not happen. Like I said, there were several ways they should have known to be looking for that card before this process kicked off. They just failed to do that. And like I said, we're going to really focus on page 204 of the EMS training guide to make sure in the future that doesn't happen in some of these counties. And just as a quick thing, the old EMS, the GEM system, had a really obnoxious color-coded thing to let you know when you were missing a card. It was green if you had accounted for it. It was red if you didn't. In this one, it's a checkbox, which is still pretty clear, but not as obnoxious. So maybe we'll look at making it a little more obnoxious in the future so people will be more, realize that there could be a potential card out there.
Just a quick question, follow-up. Do you think that did they find this because they pulled out those boxes of ballots and were looking at the paper, or did they find it because they were looking at the list of voters who checked in, if that makes sense?
What it was is we knew there was an issue based on the check-in. It was verified when we did the physical counting of the ballots. So
okay, so they just
there is a card out there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, Stephen Fowler.
Yeah. Hey, Gabe. Pretending this isn't 2020, which I know is something we all want to do, can you contextualize this process and how much of this is normal? Counties tweaking results, or it taking 2 weeks for things to be finalized. Can you just put it into context of how a normal post-election process looks?
Well, let's look at it this way. Normally, you wouldn't have a hand count like this. And historically, in nearly every state, other than maybe Florida, you have pretty wide margins. So you have counties that have up to last Friday, and we've kind of thrown some extra work on them. So some of them kind of slid over to a couple of more days to go through and do those reconciliations. Make sure they have all the ballots and all the cards accounted for. This is, for lack of a better word, normal. You have 159 counties with different levels of resourcing. And again, one of the things I said early on in this audit process is I was less worried about the really, really big counties because they have lots of resources and ability to handle some of this. I wasn't that worried about a lot of the small counties because it was a small amount of things that, a couple of people can probably manage. It was those middle counties with sort of mid-level to low-level resources and a decent amount of ballots was the ones we would see a lot of the sliding around. So it kind of fits with the Floyd and the Fayette and potentially the Waltons of the world. So that's where you see some of those things, but all of this is normal. The abnormal thing is the presidential election is now within 12,929 votes in this state. The last time we had one that close was 1992. I was the political director for Bush Quayle in 1992, so that one stings a little bit still. I think it was 13,000 votes that President Clinton was elected by. But we had the Ross Perot situation, which was another weird thing to deal with. So again, this is all normal. We are trying to get done accurately in a smooth, orderly, methodical way. So when we find some of these things like this, it's irritating to a degree because you want it to be spot on as you go. But the reason you have the audit is because human beings are going to make mistakes, and you find those mistakes and you correct those mistakes as you go. And in this case, when the margin is so narrow, every little thing matters. I mean, I can guarantee you in 18 and 16 and 14, you just keep on going back, there's always these things that slide around onesie, twosies and stuff. And generally, it's going to be smaller on the paper. On the old machines we had, it was a memory card and that was it. Other than the handful, and I say handful in the scheme of things, paper, absentees, emergency ballots, or provisionals. Now everything is on paper. So it is a different world that our elections directors are having to deal with. So that is a situation that changed it up a little bit. So normal in a paper ballot environment, this is normal, but this is the first time Georgia's had to deal with a 100% paper ballot environment.
Right.
So
and then
in context on that.
Yeah, and then one more quick thing. When we talk about certification, obviously with counties, they had to certify that their votes were correct and things like that. But like from the state perspective, what is left to do before the Secretary of State certifies that these are the election results?
Well, we are in the middle of a pre-certification audit. We have to finish that audit first. Then we have to go through and make sure the paperwork all lines up with the vote totals we've seen, with the information we have in the voter registration system. The credit for voting is there, and they essentially all balance out. We look for any discrepancies at that front just to make sure, sort of like a last check before you have the airplane take off. But those are the basic things that we'll be doing as we go into the certification process on Thursday, Friday, hoping that we hit all our marks on this audit and we are done by Wednesday at midnight. The county's work has to be done, and then the final stuff, going into Thursday morning, we have to get the report out from the Arlo system. But again, I still feel confident that we will meet those goals, hit that certification, and get those ballots out the door for military and overseas voters on Saturday.
Okay, LaCrae is next.
Hi, thanks for doing this again. I just wanted to, if you could remind me, is there any penalty associated with the counties not having this done by midnight Wednesday? And also, if it is the case that a county doesn't finish by then, does that mean that we could potentially still find ballots that were not properly reconciled in other counties too?
There's always that possibility until we're done. If they don't make the deadline of midnight on Wednesday, there is potentially things under the SEB rules that we could then look at fining or giving a letter of instruction. But look, this isn't about punishing people. This is about getting it right and setting deadlines and meeting deadlines. So our hope is that we can work with the counties, get them the resources they need to finish this up in an appropriate way so we can get the accurate results finalized into our election management system so that we can certify the election results by Friday.
Emil Moffitt.
Hey, Gabe, you said you had an inkling that something was a little off with the numbers in Fayette. Are you seeing anything else around the state that kind of is similar to that?
Not that I'm aware of right now, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That was one that we saw that was, when you look at the reports you get from that out of the absentee ballot report, it was kind of, it was too large to just be, it could have been a data error, but that would mean there'd be lots of individual data errors. And it made us think there might be one of those. We figured we'd go through the audit process to verify what we were looking at. And as it did match up. And that's when we knew the card was there. And I don't know the individual, I don't know the timeline of who found it when, but I do know they saw this discrepancy and they said, okay, there has to be a card. And then they found the card. So that's kind of where that went down.
And the single digit, just a quick follow up, the single digit differences we're seeing in the majority of counties who've finished their process so far.
No, the majority is zero. The majority, you'll see 57 of them are at no discrepancy. Let's be clear. So of the 110, 57 are at zero right now on the discrepancy side.
Okay, for those in the single digits, you believe those are errors, slight errors, and not ballots that were uncounted.
Yeah, because in some cases they went up by one ballot or down by one ballot, and they could have gone up by one ballot because two absentee ballots got stuck together when it went through the scanner. I mean, there's no real way to necessarily know for certain, or a human being did a stack of 11 when it should have been a stack of 10. I mean, that's the kind of thing you see when you're down to the single digit kind of things.
Thanks.
Joan.
Hi, Gabriel. Thank you for doing this. I'm with the Epoch Times. I actually have a question. We heard that counties don't tabulate their own vote totals, even in the hand counting process, because they upload them to the RLO system, and then the RLO system run by the Secretary of State office tells them their totals. So in other words, we local counties don't calculate their final vote totals in the local office. Is that understanding correct?
No. What we're seeing in Arlo, they're only looking at the presidential race. They still have all the stuff they have to put into our normal election management system and to the normal election night reporting system run by CIDL. So in this particular case, most counties are keeping their own spreadsheet of their tally sheets because they have the physical tally sheets on those. They put it into Arlo, and Arlo is just doing a measurement to say, this is the appropriate outcome for this race. And we're not using these results to certify. We're using these results to verify the results we saw of election night in our election management system as reflected in the election night reporting. So the final thing that we certify is going to be those results that are tallied together inside the 159 election management systems individually, and then they're sending to our system when we do what we call the ballot run, which is where we have to get the physical jump drives and paperwork to go with those to get our certified results finished up. So that's how that all kind of comes together for the final version of the final numbers. But no, Arlo has nothing to do with our certification other than it's the tool that we use to run the pre-certification audit. Does that help you? Joan? Okay, who's next?
Julia.
Okay. Julia, unmuted. Oh, you're still muted. Oh, there you go.
Sorry.
Sorry. Just quick thing. Sorry if I missed this somehow. Do you have I know that as of 11 a.m. there were 300,000 ballots left to count. Is there any update on that number? And then just to follow up on my earlier question about the Trump campaign's message, just in general, when you're seeing these accusations of voter fraud in Georgia as a result of some of these discrepancies, do you feel like it's on the Secretary of State's office to be more kind of public messenger about why it's not fraud and kind of convincing some of these critics that is not the case as you've outlined here?
I think that we've been pretty apparent that we do not see widespread voter fraud in the state, that there will be illegal votes, and we know that. We're tracking those down. But I think the Secretary, I think every time I've been in front of the cameras, I've been very clear we have not seen widespread voter fraud. We do know that there's going to be illegal voting, but it's going to be down in the low hundreds, not in the 12,929 range. We have no reason to believe we've seen anything like that, but we will investigate everything. Like I said, we opened up 2 other investigations this morning in Fulton to go over some specific things, some relating to some of these charges to, either confirm or deny the outcomes on those. So that's what we've been doing. I think we've been very clear that we have not seen rampant voter fraud in this state. And if anybody has evidence of that, as I said, and I suggested, there is due process in this country. There is a system of courts where you can take your grievances and take your evidence. But this office will continue to follow the law, which means right now we go through the process of doing this risk limiting audit, which turned into a hand audit, which will be completed on Wednesday night. And then we'll move the certification process, which we need to complete by Friday in order to do our duty to get the ballots out to our military and overseas voters on Saturday.
Well, that's all we've got. Wait,
Is that everybody?
wait, I think Julia wanted to follow up.
I saw it looked like a gang sign for a hashtag. I didn't know what that was.
Yeah, sorry, I was reminding you of the number of the balance left to count.
I was looking online. I was waiting to get a report from the Voting Works folks. I'll spitball and say we're probably at 4.8 million right now, only because there's a lot of work's being done to try to balance everything out and see where they're at. But I do know that like Chatham is still counting and Gwinnett is still counting. So those are the biggest buckets to get us over that 5 million mark that are still out there.
Got it. And sorry, one last thing, just to clarify, are the results of the manual recount in the official presidential race tally, that will be made public, right? Do you have a timeline for that, or?
Our intent is this audit verifies the outcome of the stuff that we loaded through our election management system and was basically shown on election night reporting. And we will be certifying what comes out of our election management system. It's precinct based. The Arlo number is just to verify the outcome. Now we will make that public. We will show every county result. We will show every ballot that they were off. We will all that will be public. We will put the tally sheets, PDFs of those scanned in to so that everybody can go review everything. I mean, we're trying to be as transparent as we can, but all that information will be released. I don't have a timeline because there's going to be thousands of pieces of paper. We're trying to figure out how do we organize and put it on a website that makes rational sense to navigate. But that we do intend to do that as quickly as we can. We will probably do a release on the numbers and probably give county level results with a spreadsheet attached as a starting point so that y'all have information you need to tell your viewers and your readers. I guess listeners too, for the radio folks out there. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Who else we got? Anybody? I saw Emma jump late.
Joan,
Yeah.
that's another question.
Okay.
Yeah, just a follow-up question, Gab. Thank you for doing this again. So I guess maybe a lot of people, they are concerned about using the computer system to even just to save the data. How would the Secretary of State office make sure there's no glitches in the computer system? Which
the easiest thing to do is the fact that all election management systems and every piece of our equipment that's done for voting and tallying voting is air gapped, which means it is not touching the internet. So that's one of the biggest things we talk about. In our voter registration system is put on we just rebuilt and putting it onto a very secure new server environment. And we have partnerships with Department of Homeland Security to keep an eye on these items. And you might have seen that the Homeland Security and especially the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency put out this was the single most secure election in the history of the United States. We absolutely know this is the single most secure election in Georgia. There is no, hammer and scorecard. It doesn't exist. It's not real. Anybody telling you that, discount what they're saying, because it's just zero evidence. It doesn't exist. And all it does is undermines people's confidence in the outcome. So the biggest thing is our systems are air gapped, which means they're not on the internet, so nobody could do anything on that front. And then the voter registration system, which is another system as part of that, is put in a very secure environment. We have partnerships with Homeland Security. We have outside vendors that do penetration testing. We look for vulnerabilities at all time because when you're dealing in the cybersecurity environment, it is a never-ending race. And we know that. We're always going to be very leery of that, especially going into this January 5th runoff. There used to be 50 targets in 50 states. Now there's going to be one target here for people to try to make mischief on that stuff. But we see more problematically from both foreign actors and some internal here, is people who are supplying disinformation. And disinformation is kind of eats away, it's corrosive to everybody's belief in the system, the outcomes of these elections. So our system is very secure. You can always work to make everything more secure with time and effort and money and resources. And we will always be continuing to do that to improve on what we have done so far. But we've really focused on that in this office over the last 2 years, basically. Walter, what else we got?
That's it. That's all the hands that are up.
All right, so it's 4:45. I think we'll be doing this again tomorrow at 11, I believe. Just keep an eye out that those potentially can move based on, other information that's happening. And there is actual work we have to do, but one of the most important things we can do is to continue to inform y'all so you can inform the public of what's actually going on in Georgia and give you as much reality check as we can on the system. We remain transparent. We remain dedicated to the rule of law. We remain dedicated to the process. This is process, process, process. We will continue to follow those rules, those laws. And if anybody has a specific issue that they want to address, there is a court of law. Take it to them. This is the opportunity. I mean, it's coming very soon that everything will be done here, and we will be able to move on to the next round of elections, which is our January 5th elections, which is very important we execute those properly as well. So with that, I say have a good night, and if you've got any other questions, circle back up with Walter or Ari, and we'll try to get you the answers. Thanks a lot.